Welcome to the Notes to My Legal Self, AI Insights, where law and AI collide. Get ready to level up your legal game with us. We've got career advice, cutting-edge developments, mind-blowing legal tech, and more. Know someone making waves in the legal AI world? Nominate them, or even nominate yourself. We love courageous souls. And don't forget, we want to hear from you too. Ask questions, drop comments. Let's build a community of legal superheroes. But here's the deal. We're all about to have a blast. AI may be serious, but we're here to make it fun. So buckle up, get ready to power up, and let's embark on this exciting journey together. Now, let's introduce your fearless host, Olga Mack. Get ready to dive into the awesomeness of Notes to My Legal Self, AI Insights. Let's go.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Notes to My Legal Self. I am Olga Mack. You probably know me, and if you don't, check out my LinkedIn and you will know much more than you ever wanted to know about me. This have become the series where I and my, co-host, Olga Kassi, this is, a proposal. We never talked about it. I'm going to put you on the spot. Will you be my co-host, please?
Of course. I couldn't think of saying anything else, but yes.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. You all just witnessed the proposal and acceptance. And it is in a tangible form, so therefore enforceable. Anyway, welcome everyone. You know me, and you now have seen Kassi many times. And if you don't know either of us, check out our LinkedIn and you will know more about us than you ever wanted to know. And we will talk about FTC recent press release and its new powers and positions. But before we do, instead of introducing ourselves, we'll maybe share things that are not on LinkedIn. I will ask questions, Kassi may answer, she may ask some questions. We will do it for a little while before we go into a substantive discussion of FTC. I hope that sounds like a great plan. I'd like to do quick, snappy, quick questions where you don't think twice, answer, maybe give some narrative, but not too much. Let's start. Kassi.
All right.
Law school or on-the-job training?
On-the-job training.
Legal ethics or legal loopholes?
Legal ethics. I'm a rule follower, so.
A rule follower. I have to say, I love them both. Loopholes, though, are pretty exciting.
Right.
Okay. Client confidentiality or zealous advocacy?
Client confidentiality and zealous advocacy.
Yeah, that's tough to choose one, right? All right. Depositions or interrogations?
Depositions. I have one for you.
Okay, go.
This is about the FTC. Do you prefer shopping online or shopping in person?
Oh my, can I just say I just like shopping? Why choose? If I can do it in metaverse, I will do it too. In all fairness, I'm a highly strategic and focused buyer. But yes, online and offline, and where the things I need are, I will be there. See you there.
Okay. I wouldn't expect anything less from you, Olga. So.
Yeah, life should be beautiful. Why not supplement it with shopping? All right, lawyer jokes. Love them or hate them?
Love them.
You love them?
Yeah, I do.
They are guilty pleasures. Document review or legal writing?
I'm going to say document review, going to my roots. That's where you find all the juicy stuff, potentially.
I love doc review. I think you win cases with doc review, not with writing. You can have a not so good writing, but if you find a smoking gun, you find a smoking gun. You can win despite yourself, not because of yourself. I'm actually with you. I think cases, especially closed cases, are won on evidence.
Right. And sometimes it's not even, it's just the PR, or it could be, it's not necessarily even, it's a smoking gun, but this is a very sensitive thing, or this is not going to look favorably for us. It can drive things towards negotiation and settlement too.
Yeah. Procedural law or substantive law?
Substantive, baby. Let's see what's at the heart of the issue.
Really? I love the rules of the game.
Really? So more so than substance. Okay.
Yeah, I feel I love substance too. And it just substance really comes down to a lot of depths where you lose the jury and the judge. But the rules of the game and the rules of the game.
Very like logic minded, that there's a logic to it, just a very operational aspect of it. So I can see your brain like really loving that.
Yeah, facts, at some point, the facts are what the facts are. And the law is, and what law is even less so flexibly than facts. But the one who understands the rules of the games, that's where you can make the stars align. I think that's where the lawyering comes in.
Wait, I have a question for you. Do
Yeah.
you like writing more or do you like reading more? Because I know you're a prolific writer and reader.
Oh, that's a tough one. That's really a tough one. I have perfected the elementary school skills of reading, writing, and arguing. So I would exceed in the elementary school. It's a tough one because I synthesize and made connection both through reading and writing, and both are instrumental in my forming strategy. So it's really both. I can't choose. Just kidding. What about you?
I like writing a lot, but I think reading, just being able to learn so much from other people. And my dog Zuzu agrees with me if you could happen to hear her. But I find I don't have as much time to read as I would like. And I still like reading more than listening to an audiobook. So
That's the other thing. I also like listening. I perfected all parts of learning of reading, writing, kinesthetically and audibly, and speaking it out, and then creating something. For me, they're all kind of parts of learning. So I can't choose. So yeah, let's add to it. Not choose. Let's add. Okay.
yeah.
A legal career, fate or choice?
I think my life is a perfect example of fate. So
Interesting. Total choice on my part. My folks have tried to talk me out. Many people have tried to talk me out. I think my family have envisioned me to be an engineer or a doctor. They really wanted me to be a productive member of society. I'm trying to live up to that expectation every day. All right, final question. IP or crim law?
IP.
IP. I would normally say IP because that's why I went to law school, because of technology. What I'm seeing is law is intersecting IP law and technology with basically everything else. In law school, I tried to stay away from crim law and securities, for example. But then I found myself in Web3. And actually, I was a deputized prosecutor in San Francisco. And that was actually some of the most important training I had, both as a courtroom training and thinking through criminal implications of things. So I now increasingly think that technology is in every part of law. So I find myself reading criminal cases and securities cases for recreation. So that's where I am in life.
I do. I am a big fan of true crime and love a good documentary or book on white collar crime. So I would say IP in practice, criminal in my free time. So
entertainment. Let's dive into our conversation about FTC, because FTC recently had a press release and it approved a resolution authorizing the use of compulsory process that is related to AI and generative AI products and services. And then notably, this resolution includes civil investigative demands, or CIDs, which is essentially serves functionally as a subpoena. So very interesting approach by FTC. So the most interesting part for me is that FTC defines AI very broadly. It encompasses machine-based system capable of making predictions, recommendations, or decisions that impact real or virtual environments. So it doesn't have to be generative AI, it could be anything. And it includes generative AI, but also includes synthetic contents like images, videos, audios, and text. So for me, that part is probably the most interesting, the definition of AI. And yes, it's very interesting. And so this is a very exciting developments, very new for FTC. Have I summarized correctly what happened? And two, what do you think is the most significant part of FTC resolution?
Yes. And I think it also could potentially not just a company's AI and how they use it, but maybe even third parties that they engage. So I think that To me, what this says is we may be waiting on AI acts to get passed in the EU and US and UK, but that doesn't mean existing agencies aren't going to move forward and actively start investigating and pursuing the use of AI. So I think that it presents how present compliance issues around AI. And to your point, it's not just generative AI, it's maybe AI that's already been in use for a while and it's now starting to face scrutiny. Those discussions about do we need a chief AI officer, we're seeing happening because of President Biden's EO on AI. I think that's going to hopefully alert companies, especially those dealing directly with consumers, that they really need to assess all the ways that AI is being used in their company and how it may be regulated not only by laws down the road, but by existing agencies.
A couple of things for me. I definitely think that broad definition is very interesting and positions FTC to have sweeping powers. That is also very much on the historical trend. Full disclosure, I worked at FTC for about a year when I was in law school in San Francisco. Very familiar with the agency, how it works, very closely follow it. Historically, it has been a small agency, actually. There was a fairly narrow function of protecting consumers. When I joined in law school, which was a couple of decades ago, I'm not going to age myself, I promise. I'm just going to say I'm going to age myself. The FTC was just beginning focusing on privacy. The primary focus in the past actually was on more antitrust and consumer sort of deception. And about a few decades, it started focusing on privacy and has become a predominant force behind enforcement of privacy, especially as it comes to consumer. The agency has historically been connected to similar agencies outside of the United States. That is to say, they have a lot of reciprocities and collaborate with similar regulators and legislative bodies across the world. So if you hear from somebody somewhere, chances are you may hear from FTC and the other way around. FTC historically has a very tight connection with DOJ and has since perfected that connection. It's a very close referral system. So if you're doing something wrong, could be borderline criminal, you may hear from the prosecutors. And maybe a third observation about this agency and its increasing powers. And to me, this resolution is on trend with expanding powers and role of the FTC. It used to be a fairly small agency. In fact, what it's historically known for picking relatively few cases or investigations to go after, companies to go after, and winning every single one. That's why when I give advice to my clients when I practice law, is that you really don't, it's a small and not as a well-known agency as, say, SEC or DOJ, but you really don't want to pick that fight, because if they picked you, that usually means they have a lot of conviction that they can win it, because they have very limited resources historically. So they only pick cases that they know how to win, whether it's big cases or small cases. They sometimes historically have gone after big names, and they sometimes gone after small names to send various messages. But the historic trend, and to me, this is a trend, that's why this SIDS is very important, an expansive definition of AI. It's on the trend that the power, the mandate of that agency is expanding and has been historically expanding. AI, I think, is going to double or triple that agency. It is pretty clear that this agency is going to be hiring lawyers near you. And I think they have increasing powers. And to me, this is where this is when I think it's going to be essentially a primary regulator of anything data related, yes, including AI. But I would say anything data related, hence the definition that is so expensive.
The point that you raise about the definition of AI being very broad, it makes me wonder, what are they going to go after first? Because it is so broad. What's going to get their scrutiny first? In your experience working there, what do you have any sense of what gets their scrutiny? Is it really people maybe reporting things, or is it do you think they maybe already have things in mind of what they want to potentially go after?
And there is a trend. If you look at what they've done in the past, they historically go after bigger names first, things you've known about, which is why I think there is something already going on with big names, which I don't want to go into right now.
Yeah.
And initial actions are pretty public and sometimes have mild implications, but they usually gain steam. What do you expect?
I suspect there will be some attention on, even though it is a broad definition, there will be some impact or focus on the generative AI piece and our consumers potentially being deceived in any way, or what sort of notice needs to be given to consumers. A little bit, I'm just thinking a little bit on the influencer side of things. And I know how influencers have an obligation. They need to disclose if something is an ad or if something is paid content. And I know the FTC has gone after very high, big name people as a way to try and manage that a little bit. And I wonder if that will have something, especially there's a lot of conversation about misinformation and we're starting to see AI being used more in generative AI to help people shop. I could see that maybe being an initial priority.
The influencers part has definitely been another growth and expansion for FTC. Again, the mandate, go back to FTC statute, is to protect consumers. We have seen the rise of influencers. People buy all kinds of stuff because a very famous person have directed them to do. Think of people taking crypto advice from, I don't know, Kim Kardashian. That was an SEC case, but it could have been FTC related as well. So we've seen that, and we've seen gradual, in addition to more stuff happening in privacy and security, and referring it to DOJ and collaborating, multi-agency collaboration, and then actually having collaboration with, I think, indirect collaboration with SEC. Those agencies work together. The rise of influencer marketing regulation definitely relate to that, and it's interesting, they do sometimes go after individual influencers, but they really are going after the companies that hire them. Mm-hmm. And I think, to your point, between sort of various things in security and privacy and influencers, all of those are examples of growing powers of FTC and bigger mandate. I think AI, which I think that's why the reason for a broad definition, because you can, with that broad definition, you can go back to privacy, security, influencers. You can go back also to antitrust laws, mm-hmm. which I think is another concern when you talk about large models, is a concentration of technology. And that discussion has been happening now for a few decades when it comes to Amazon, Google, all of the big players. So I think the reason for the broad definition of and broad powers is precisely to give FTC this very wide powers to protect consumers from soup to nuts, from privacy practices to antitrust practices, and very much to round that agency up and empower it, not just as a small agency that collaborates with everyone and picks its cases selectively, but a really true enforcer. I think that's where it is trending. And I really do think that if you're considering career in government, and protection of consumer is your thing. I actually happen to really love FTC. I'm a big fan of FTCs. If I were a government lawyer, that's exactly where I would work. I really love that agency quite a lot. It was one of the best experiences I had in law school. I really do think that that is definitely a place that I would give a second thought. What do you think impact of FTC will be on the current AI development?
I think it will cause companies, again, to nearly like what we saw with data privacy, where before data privacy, no one really tracked where their data was. There was no data mapping or anything. That maybe wasn't even a thing. I think we're going to start having AI mapping or AI broadly defined mapping. More companies need to start identifying and tracking all the examples of AI being used in their companies, I just don't think that was anything anyone thought about a year ago. So to me, I think it's really a clarion call of similar to what we're seeing with the EEOC. They're just probably, companies should start preparing themselves, considering budget allotments for, we may need to start drilling into this piece to our operations of identifying things and thinking of how we may want to build in some compliance, even though there's not a full regulatory scheme. We may need to start thinking about that, or at least having working groups, leadership teams to think about how we're going to address this, because it's not going to go away. So that's my big, I think, takeaway.
Yeah, I actually think that the work you're doing or have been doing with data will very much give you a leg up for every adventure you have in disruptive technologies such as AI, because I don't believe you can do any analysis about AI unless you understand what happens before the black box, what happens inside the black
Right.
box of AI, and what happens after. So that is a data question, and your company, depending on where you are, what question you're addressing with AI, may be dealing with any one of those three or all three. And I do believe that it starts with data mapping. So companies that have been very intentionally thinking about their data strategy, mapping it out, doing the hard work, that is actually a lot of hard work behind the scenes, and a huge investment, will have a leg up. I do think that we should be preparing ourselves for more regulations and more guidance. I actually hope for more guidance, because I do think that there's a lot of, we are in the point of history with AI where there's a lot of slogans. I think we all agree that the right things need to be done. I never really meet folks who say, no, let's just see how it goes. It just doesn't happen very much. I think the how, the operationalizing of it is often missing. And I do hope that FTC will actually share, not just become a cop, but become a compassionate cop, right? With broad powers comes, like, I would say, a broad responsibility. If you're going to be having compulsory investigations and you have a broad definition of the scope that you're covering, I sure hope that you're going to provide some guidance before you act upon it, so that companies and individuals can act accordingly and follow the best practices. So I actually hope that some leadership from FTC, and historically they provide quite a lot of guidance and thoughtfulness. Everyone I meet from FTC, met over now 2 decades, has been very intentional and thoughtful and joined the agency because they really believe in the mission of protecting consumers, which is a massive mission. It really touches all of us. And so I've seen a lot of thoughtfulness, and what I'm hoping, what I think the impact of this may be, is more guidance. And that's what I hope for. I think it may have other impacts, but I do hope to see more detailed guidance that executives can and board members can implement to do the right thing.
And I think you're right. I've seen guidance that they've prepared, again, for the influencer, the disclosure of, if you have a campaign, you need to if you're out there talking about a product that you were paid to talk about, you need to disclose that. And that line can seem at first blush like a very obvious line, but there's a spectrum there as far as when disclosure is needed. And the FTC has done a very good job of explaining what that all means, giving scenarios for people to consider. I think they updated it this past year. So I think you're right. It seems like it's probably something that they have on their radar and they're working on. And one thing I really like about the FTC is not only did they make this announcement about, hey, we're going to create this mechanism for SIDS, or I tend to call them CIDs, and maybe it's just like me, but
I was going to say, kind of like sounds like a horrible disease.
But here we are. But they also announced a contest about encouraging people to come up with solutions on voice cloning, because voice cloning is synthetic versions of us is something that we should all be concerned about. So similar to the Copyright Office, really in the PTO office for patent and trademark as well, but in particular copyright, there's kind of this call for support and feedback. And I love that FTC is doing it as a contest. There is money prizes tied to it as well. There really definitely seems to be a meeting the technology where it's at with hackathons. In essence, this is a hackathon, right?
FTC has been, in my humble view, a fairly progressive agency now for 2 decades. They provided a lot of guidance, and they provided it in the form that is consumable for the folks they serve. At least they could be better, but they've been doing it better than most regulators I've seen in the United States. They have used visuals, they've distributed their materials where consumers are, they have TV and radio kind of commercials, I guess you would call them, guidance to educate the public. They really actually, for a small agency with a small budget, I really do think that they understood that consumer portion of it quite better than others. I think this contest, to me, is very much an historic trend for FTC trying to reach the ultimate audience that they're trying to serve, which is all of us as consumers. And to me, that makes sense. That's exactly you innovate today through hackathons, by enticing and encouraging technologists to join your mission, by paying real money for people who win, not monopoly money, so to speak. That makes it more fun by amplifying the voices. And actually, let's talk about this contest, and let's talk about, what do you think the broad thing that FTC tries to protect, and why do you think this contest? Why do you think they're doing this contest?
I think that there are a lot of people trying to figure out how to deal with the issue of synthetic data, how to track provenance, how to address it from the perspective of misinformation. And to me, I suspect this has to do with the misinformation piece of it, it being part, the consumers potentially being misinformed, and also creating awareness that this technology is out there. So there are some different, elements to the contest, but to me, I think that no one has an obvious, clear answer of how to deal with synthetic data in the context of recreating an individual, because there's so much data that's out there of us, because many of us have posted on social media sites and things like that. So I think it's wrapping our arms around the idea that this is something that could spin out and become very dangerous in a very short amount of time. And what can we do to get feedback from people so we can try and solve this? And we see other groups addressing it. I know Interpol has some, targeted task force related to it. We know that Congress is looking into it, and there's other initiatives out there about it. But and maybe it's to help create awareness so people realize there is so much synthetic data that is going to be created, and how can we tackle it?
Yeah, I think I do agree that it's a couple of things. I think it's awareness of the public. I think definitely, because that's what their ultimate goal is. I think it's also two more things. I think it is recruiting the white hat technologists, so to speak, to be on the side of justice, right? So to show that FTC is actually cares about this issue and has a position on this issue and wants to have engaging conversations. But I think the number one reason I would actually suspect is education of FTC staff. I think the staff will learn quite a lot through submissions. I think many of us I myself included in that category, are highly undereducated about synthetic data. And what we know is that it could cause wars.
Mm-hmm.
For example, we've seen, I don't want to go into politics or really terrible conflicts we have currently going on in the world, but you can't open the internet and read 3 seconds about them without first seeing a horrific picture and then 5 seconds later read an analysis why that was AI generated. There have been a number of examples of fearless leaders all of a sudden speak languages that they don't speak to audience that don't usually engage on the subject matters that they know nothing about. And that those are obvious sort of deep fakes. So there are a lot of issues. This has been very visible and possibly very impactful. Neither impact nor technology is really understood. And we started dealing with it in that sort of influence with influencers, as you mentioned. And there it was, that's the beginning of influencing decision making in the using the form of writing, which is highly controlled. And there is a practice of verifying facts, which is something that lawyers in-house usually review for. And adding disclosure is a marginal change in that. But this technology allowing to make synthetic stuff, and not just in writing, but also in audio, visual, and video forms. I guess video is visual, so it's the same thing, but I wanted to emphasize the difference between pictures and moving pictures, and how to educate consumers to spot them when they're hard to spot, how to understand this technology, the extent and limits of it. I think this is yet to be, one, developed and two, understood. And I think FTC wants to understand that. I think that's what this conversation is all about.
And I think too that, as I alluded to before, there are other groups out there developing data standards and provenance standards for when synthetic media is created. But let's be honest, bad actors are not, they're going to find a way to get around that. So I think you have to attack it from both ends. You have to, like the authentic users, figuring out how to do it from a tracking that information, and then how do we identify and deal with the unauthorized users of the synthetic media. So I think it's nearly attacking from the other side, because we can't assume that everyone's going to play nice and make sure metadata is getting captured for their synthetic data. They don't want that because they don't want to be captured. I think that's another very important element of it. It doesn't mean we shouldn't come up with those standards. It just means that we should also be aware that people are going to avoid them to further their own misinformation schemes, whether they're illegal or not.
Yeah, I want to go back to the kind of, they started with United States is saying we're not waiting for EU, we're going to do our own. we're gonna study and engage, and I would expect nothing less from this very important jurisdiction. I don't necessarily think it's a reaction to what EU is doing. I think that would have happened one way or another, and I would not expect the United States to be a follower of anybody when it comes to important trends in technology. But nonetheless, EU stuff is happening and has started happening a little earlier. The legislation is basically going through various cycles and improvements and all of that. And that's clearly going to have a massive impact. I'm very much, when I'm observing what's happening in the United States and the EU with respect to AI, I'm reminded of privacy. You have two regimes going on parallel tracks. Both are going to be very influential. They have a lot of stuff in common. They care about the ethics and the consumers and antitrust and all kinds of stuff. But they're also going to be different enough so that it will make your in-house job difficult. But I also, it's interesting with all the parallels, I also think that there are a lot of differences. So for example, privacy actually, in terms of regulations, both in the United States and in the EU, developed after a lot of technologies have been out and released. I advise many companies, basically, essentially, when they're on, there were not much guidance or regulation and not a lot of threat. Whereas a big difference here is that we see activities much sooner. It reminded me of, I think at some point I said, my kids are so different, yet they have the same parents. And somebody wiser than me explained to me that they actually are born in two different environments. My first was born when my husband and I were completely scared. It was our firstborn, and we were scared to break her. So we treated her a certain way. And the second was not born to just mom and dad. She was born to mom and dad and an older sister. And all of whom had experience that you cannot break a child if you wish well, so to speak. And so she is maybe different for many reasons, including because she actually was literally born into a different family. So that's how I think of privacy versus AI regulations. There's a lot of parallels, but there is a massive difference because now the regulators actually have the learnings of privacy. And the AI regulations are born into a family that have had a couple of decades of experiences with data and privacy. And I think that actually will make the AI stuff significantly, yes, similar because the same regulators and similar trends, a lot of trends, but also significantly different because they're starting early and they have a baggage of learnings. And so one of the things I want to talk about is what do you think will be the impact on innovation with this FTC trend?
I think it's going to require anyone building something new to maybe, what is it saying in Silicon Valley, like break fast or break things fast or whatever. I think that
move fast and like break things. Yeah.
I think that you can't, it's harder now to justify just being cavalier with building something when you're dealing with people's personal data, PII or PHI. I think that you just don't have the benefit of it being the Wild West. To your point, there's a robust amount of laws and regulation and scrutiny around privacy. And I do think that all of the things that happened since OpenAI went live with GPT last year, it really created a lot of scrutiny on PII and PHI in a way that I think wasn't always as present, at least here in the US. People are paying, I think, a little bit more attention to it, especially like the context of the synthetic data, realizing that there could be faked versions of them getting created. There just seems to be more awareness and maybe scrutiny of it. And I think that anyone who's building, they have to account for that in that process. And will it stifle innovation? I don't think so, because I think you already have a more robust data privacy set of rules in the EU. And so many companies, we are in a global system. They're building not just for the US, but they're building for a global place. So when you're building on a global stage, you want to account for the highest level of scrutiny so you're not getting docked there, I would think. But
yeah, I think I agree with you that move fast and break things ethos is no longer around. It's no longer an option. It actually has been true now for a while. I remember about 7-8 years ago when I was in blockchain, we very much talked about compliance as a competitive advantage because you really cannot close sales. Sure, you can build stuff that is not all that reliable or ethical or protective of consumers. But if you actually want to be a reputable player in the marketplace, and the marketplace increasingly demands that, you need to comply. And people who have longevity, companies that have longevity have essentially compliance as a competitive advantage. So I think that is a move fast and break things has been gone now for a little while. I do think that makes it harder, and not just with this FTC resolution, but now again for a while, to put contraption together and release it into the wild, see how it does. Oh, it broke a couple of things. Oopsie. Let's try this again. Sorry, we didn't mean anything. I think that way of building has been done for a long time. And FTC is very much in trend. I do think that makes compliance early on and building with that in mind and being responsible is super important. So that brings us to the end. We've talked about a couple of things, and I'm just curious if you were in house, for example, or you were in the law firm and you're advising companies and you're a lawyer trying to get up to speed quickly, just like FTC does, really. I guess maybe what would you recommend to one, level up? Because I think we all need to be leveling up in terms of our knowledge. And two, practical steps you take as advisor to whether it's an early stage company, a mid stage company, or mature company, because frankly, AI is going to be affecting us all. What would be your recommendations or best practices?
I would say, sorry, my dogs are wound up.
I think your dog has an opinion. That's fair to say, right?
Yeah. One thing I would say is I think two things to maybe prioritize learning about, and one is synthetic data. Just understanding how quickly it's moving, how it can be created, how it can be used, how it's very difficult to detect, just creating awareness around that for multiple reasons. And then the other thing I would suggest is if your company is leveraging or your clients are leveraging chatbots that engage with the public, having a better understanding of hallucinations and also how threat actors can use prompts to extricate potentially private information. So I think those are two risk areas that are areas that I think people should be maybe more aware of in the tech.
Yeah, I think my recommendations may be twofold. One is related to education. I think we should be doing exactly what FTC is doing. Get in, be part of the community, learn about technology. Yes, go do some training. Yes, go talk to your technologists. Yes, go talk to your peers outside of your company. I think that's going to be very important. That educational component, we all have to level up, and it's going to be a process. We're not looking at a day or two or a week or even a month. This is going to be a process. It's going to be very important. And then I do think that the second items, I think if you want to be prepared, you need to continue investing in sort of your data strategy, and specifically what I call data inventory. And I tend to bifurcate it when I'm in the company in two ways. One, I focus on kind of stuff we sell, our products, who we serve, how data flows, and what now we do with AI and where we're trending. And then that's one aspect. And the second aspect is on the procurement, kind of stuff we buy, whether it's raw material or some sort of input or services, technology, or product that we use to ultimately serve our customers. And understand what's happening exactly there with respect to one data and various AI components. Just mere understanding of that should help you be prepared to face whatever guidance you will have to act fast, and you're gonna have to get it right. But your understanding of data flows and what's happening, what's built, how decisions are made, what's coded, that inventorying will help you. Then it will give you a foundation to keep building responsible, ethical AIs. And I guess the third recommendation is, I think FTC, my experience, I've been now a number of FTC investigation calls and meetings. FTC historically comes to the table, yes, with a lot of research and very well equipped, and a lot of conviction, and they're usually right. And they also come in the form of conversation, of learning. It's actually an agency that I think is relatively humble because it doesn't have the sort of enforcement mechanism. It relies on other agencies to actually enforce, like DOJ. It is learning, and it helps you learn in a process. Should you find yourself in conversations with FTC, either because you're an investigator or because they actually do have a lot of town hall meetings, they ask for comments, they provide a lot of information, I actually would engage in that conversation. In my view, those are conversations that are ripe of learning and lessons that you can build on as a company and as a legal professional. So those would be my top 3 recommendations. So I think we've come to the end. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. This was fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
And that brings us to the end of another thrilling episode on the Notes to My Legal Self AI Insights. We had a fantastic time exploring the fascinating intersection of law and AI with you. But hold on tight, because the adventure doesn't stop here. Stay connected with us on social media to continue the conversation, share your thoughts, and be part of our incredible community of legal enthusiasts. Together, we can inspire, learn, and make a real impact on the world of law and AI. If you enjoyed today's episode, we encourage you to share it with your friends, colleagues, and anyone else who could benefit from the exciting insights we discussed. Let's spread the knowledge and enthusiasm far and wide.